Hey guys, how are you today? Quick rant before we dive into today's chaos. As some of you might have noticed, YouTube's algorithm has decided I'm not special anymore. Shocking, I know. So now if you don't like, comment, or do a little backflip in the algorithm's honor, this video might just vanish into the void, never to be seen again. Seriously though, even a hi or "this is wild" in the comments helps way more than you think. It tells YouTube, hey, people actually like this channel. Maybe don't hide it from everyone. That can really help push my videos out to a wider audience, not just to my subscribers. So if you enjoy these stories and want to support the channel, that's the best way to do it. Now grab a drink, get comfy, and enjoy the drama. You won't want to miss this one. I guess I'll start with how everything spiraled into this mess. I'm 55 now, but to really understand how I ended up here, you've got to go back to when I was fresh out of college. Back then, I thought I had life all figured out. I met this amazing woman. At least she seemed amazing at the time. We had this whirlwind romance, the kind of love story you see in movies. It was fast, passionate, and intense. And before I knew it, we were married. I truly believed I'd hit the jackpot, that I'd found my forever person. For a while, things were good. Really good, actually. A couple of years into our marriage, we had our son, Eddie, and it felt like everything was falling into place. I had a steady job. We bought a house with a little yard, and life seemed like it was lining up just how I always imagined it would. You know that typical picture-perfect family dream you grow up hearing about. But looking back now, I can see that there were cracks in the foundation from the very beginning. At the time, I didn't want to see them. Or maybe I did see them, but I convinced myself they didn't matter. I wanted so badly for us to be happy, for us to work, that I ignored the red flags. My ex-wife, well, she had this way of taking control of everything. Every decision we made, every disagreement we had, she always had to be right. And if she wasn't, she'd flip the situation until somehow it was all my fault. She was a master at turning herself into the victim and making me feel like I was the one messing everything up. For years, I put up with it. I bit my tongue during arguments, gave in to her demands, and did everything I could to avoid rocking the boat. I told myself it was for Eddie. He was such a great kid, smart, funny, full of curiosity, and I didn't want to be the reason his world fell apart. So I kept the peace, even when it meant putting myself last, even when it meant swallowing my own feelings day after day. But the truth is, you can only do that for so long before it starts eating away at you. By the time Eddie was a young man, I was completely drained. I wasn't just tired, I was worn down in a way that's hard to explain. I'd look at my life and think, is this it? Is this really all there's going to be? I didn't want to spend the rest of my life in a marriage that felt like a never-ending battle, where I was always on the losing side. So, I made the hardest decision I've ever had to make. I filed for divorce. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I wasn't prepared for just how ugly it would get. My ex-wife didn't just fight me. She declared war. She used every trick in the book to make me out to be the villain. And the worst part, she dragged Eddie right into the middle of it. She told him I didn't care about him, that I was leaving because I was selfish and couldn't handle being a husband or a dad. She twisted every argument we'd ever had into some story about how I was distant and unloving. She conveniently left out all the years of her manipulation. All the time she pushed and pushed until I had nothing left to give. Instead, she fed Eddie lies, planting seeds of doubt in his mind. And the worst part, he believed her. Eddie wasn't a kid anymore. He was almost 20 when everything went down. He was old enough to make up his own mind. And when he testified against me during the divorce proceedings, I realized just how deeply he believed her version of things. Hearing him say those things in court, things that weren't true, broke something in me. I'd spent years coaching his soccer team, helping him with school projects, staying up all night when he was sick, and just trying to be a good dad. Sure, I wasn't perfect, but I cared. I was there. None of that seemed to matter. In the end, the court ruled that I had to pay her a significant amount of money, alimony or spousal support, or whatever the technical term is. All I knew was that it was going to be a financial blow, but I figured I'd survive. What I wasn't prepared for was the emotional cost of losing Eddie. At first, I tried to reach out to him. I understood he was busy college, friends, figuring out his life. I knew he was at an age where he was supposed to be out in the world, living his life, but it still stung. He always seemed to have time for his mom, but he couldn't spare a few hours for me. Not even during the holidays. I'd call and text, trying to make plans. I'd suggest grabbing dinner, catching a game, or just hanging out. But the answer was always the same. He was too busy, he had homework, or he was going out with friends, or he had something else going on. At first, I tried to tell myself it was normal, that he was just being a typical 20-something, caught up in his own world. But as time went on, it became clear that he just didn't want to spend time with me. That realization hit harder than anything else. It felt like I was slowly fading out of his life, like I'd become this distant figure he didn't really care about anymore. I wanted to tell him how much it hurt, how much I missed him, but I didn't want to guilt him into spending time with me. So I stayed quiet. And with every passing holiday, every missed birthday, every unanswered message, I felt like I was losing him more and more. I did everything I could to stay connected with Eddie, even after he stopped visiting. I sent him texts, emails, birthday cards, Christmas gifts, whatever I could think of to remind him I was still here, that I still cared. But his responses, when they came, were short and cold. Most of the time, it felt like I was texting into a void. I'd hear later from mutual friends or family that he'd thrown out the cards or left the gifts unopened. That stung more than I could admit at the time. Worse, I found out through those same channels that Eddie was telling people I was a terrible father, that I didn't care about him and had abandoned him. Hearing that broke something in me, but at the same time, I couldn't fully blame him. He was a teenager being manipulated by someone who was a master at playing the victim. His mom had spent years twisting things to make me the bad guy, and he'd grown up believing her version of events. I understood that. Still, understanding it didn't make the rejection hurt any less. One memory in particular still sticks out. It was a holiday weekend, and I'd planned this big trip for just the two of us. We were going to go hiking, something we'd always loved doing together when he was little. I'd spent weeks planning everything down to the smallest detail, trying to make it a perfect weekend. Then the night before, he called me. He said he couldn't come because his mom had planned some last-minute family event, and he felt like he had to go. I could hear it in his voice. He didn't want to cancel, but he'd already made his choice. I told him it was okay, and that we could always reschedule. But after I hung up, I just sat there staring at the packed bags by the door. That trip never happened. And looking back, I think that was one of the last times I tried to make plans with him. I just couldn't take the disappointment anymore. Life kept going like it always does. A few years later, I remarried. My wife and I decided not to have kids, though. Losing Eddie left a hole in me, and the thought of starting over, of risking the kind of heartbreak again, was just too much. Instead, I focused on my work and tried to be the best husband I could be to my new wife. We built a good life together, stable, happy, full of love. But no matter how much time passed, there was always this ache in my chest. Whenever I thought about Eddie, I'd see dads playing with their kids at the park or hear my coworkers talk about their kids' milestones, and it would hit me all over again. I'd wonder what Eddie was up to, if he was okay, if he ever thought about me. Then, out of nowhere, a few months ago, Eddie reached out. He's 30 now and a father himself. He told me his wife had cheated on him and left, and now he's raising his 3-year-old son on his own. He said he needed advice and that he finally understood how hard things must have been for me back then. He admitted he'd been wrong about a lot of things and said he wanted to reconnect. He told me his mom didn't get what he was going through, that she just brushed off his struggles and hadn't been much help with his son. And then he apologized for the things he said, for how he treated me, and for letting so much time pass. He said he wanted us to rebuild our relationship, to start fresh. I should be happy, right? This is everything I've wanted for years, to have him see the truth, to have him come back into my life. And still, I'm torn. On the one hand, he is my son. I've missed him every single day since he walked out of my life. I want to know him again, to meet my grandson, to make up for the lost time. Part of me wants to jump at the chance and hold on tight just in case he changes his mind. But on the other hand, I can't forget the pain he caused me. The things he said in court, the way he cut me out of his life, the years of silence, it all left scars. I can't help but wonder what his real motives are. Does he really want to fix things, or does he just need help now that he's in over his head? And then there's his mom. Is she still in his ear, still pulling the strings behind the scenes? Has he really broken free from her influence, or is this just another way for her to manipulate the situation? I've been lying awake at night, replaying everything over and over. I try to put myself in his shoes. He's hurting, he's overwhelmed, and he's probably realizing how tough life can get. But then I ask myself, why now? Why wait until things got this bad to reach out? And the question that keeps eating away at me is this: am I wrong for hesitating? Does it make me a bad father to protect myself after everything that's happened? Update. It's been a few days since Eddie reached out, and I can't stop thinking about it. His message just keeps playing over and over in my head. Every word feels like it's stuck on repeat, and I still don't know how to respond. I haven't even tried typing out a draft yet. Part of me wants to grab my phone, call him up, and say, yes, let's do this. Let's talk. Let's fix everything. But there's another part of me, a louder, more cautious part that's telling me to slow down, to really think this through before I make a move. I keep replaying the past in my head, like a movie I've seen too many times, but can't stop watching. I think about the things Eddie said back then, how he believed every lie his mom told him. I think about how everything crumbled, how the bond we had just disappeared, and then the silence, the years of nothing. It all comes rushing back, and it's like I'm living through that pain all over again. I want to believe this could be the start of something good, but I can't ignore how much it hurt to lose him in the first place. The truth is, I'm scared. Scared of getting my hopes up. Scared of opening up those old wounds and putting myself out there, only for it to fall apart all over again. I want to believe Eddie reaching out as a step forward. But there's this nagging voice in the back of my mind asking, what if it's not? What if this is just another way for things to go wrong? I talked to a close friend about it. They've been with me through everything, through the divorce, the custody battle, and all the years of silence. They know the whole story start to finish. When I told them about Eddie's message, they listened and said I should take it slow. Their advice was to meet with Eddie in person, face to face, and have an honest conversation. They said seeing him in person would help me figure out what he's really looking for. Is he reaching out because he truly wants to fix things, or is he just feeling overwhelmed now that he's in a tough spot and needs someone to bail him out? I think they're right. Sitting down with Eddie in person could give me the clarity I need, but even that idea feels like a huge step. What if it doesn't go well? What if I walk away from that conversation feeling even worse than I do now? I've been through so much with Eddie, and I don't know if I could handle another heartbreak. I've been down that road before, and I barely made it through the first time. So I'm stuck. Stuck between wanting to keep myself safe and wanting to take the risk. I know the only way to move forward is to make a choice, but it's not as simple as just sending a text or agreeing to meet up. This is years of hurt, years of love, and years of longing all wrapped up in one moment, and I just don't know what to do with it. Lately, I've been thinking a lot about what Eddie's going through. I don't know the full details of his situation, but I know his divorce was messy. He's a single dad now, raising a 3-year-old on his own, and I can only imagine how tough that must be. I know how overwhelming it is to feel like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. And even though he hurt me, I can't help but feel for him. There's a part of me that wonders if he's reaching out because he's truly ready to rebuild our relationship, or because he's struggling so much that he doesn't know where else to turn. Either way, it's hard not to feel sympathy for him. I know what it's like to feel like you're in over your head, and I can't help but wonder if that's where he is now. But if there's one thing I do know, it's this. If I decide to meet him, it's not going to be about fixing our relationship. Not right away, at least. It's going to be about my grandkid. She's the one who really matters now. She didn't ask to be part of any of this messy history, and she deserves to have a grandfather in her life who cares about her. If Eddie's serious about wanting to rebuild things, he's going to have to understand that she's my priority. So, that's where I'm at now. I'm still feeling a bit lost, but I'm also feeling a bit hopeful. Maybe this is the start of something new. Or maybe it's just another chapter in our complicated relationship. Either way, I'm ready to face it. Update 1. It's been a few more days since Eddie reached out, and everything's taken a turn. I never could have predicted. I was still mulling over how to respond to his message, torn between hope and hesitation, when my ex-wife, Cecilia, showed up at my house completely out of the blue. She didn't even knock, just barged into my house like she owned the place, like she had every right to be there. I barely had time to register what was happening before she came at me like a hurricane. Her face was beet red, her jaw tight, and her hands were clenched into fists like she was ready for a fight. Before I could even get a word out, she started yelling. It felt surreal, like something out of a bad TV drama. But this was painfully real. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the air as she accused me of manipulating Eddie. She said I must have been feeding him lies, turning him against her, poisoning his mind. The anger in her voice was so thick, I could practically feel it in the room. Her words hit me hard. I hadn't even talked to Eddie yet. Not a phone call, not even a reply to his message. I'd been taking my time trying to figure out how to approach it without making things worse. But none of that mattered to Cecilia. She didn't care about what was true or not. She'd already decided I was the villain in this story, and she wasn't about to let facts get in the way of her narrative. She didn't just stop accusing me either. She went all in, dredging up every bitter memory from our divorce like she'd been saving them for this exact moment. Every argument, every mistake, real or imagined, she threw it all at me, one after another, like she wanted to bury me under the weight of it. Her voice echoed through the room as she stormed back and forth, knocking things off the table, picking stuff up, only to slam it back down like she was trying to prove some kind of twisted point. And then she grabbed the photo. It was a framed picture sitting on the mantel, one of my favorites. It was me and Eddie from years ago. He couldn't have been more than 9 or 10. I remember that day so well. He just scored his first soccer goal, and the way his face lit up, you'd think he just won the World Cup. I love that photo because it reminded me of a time when things weren't so messy, when life felt simple and good. Cecilia yanked it off the mantel like it was some kind of evidence. She held it up, shaking it in front of me as if it proved her point. "You have no right to be in his life after everything you've done," she screamed. Her voice cracked a little when she said it, but there was no mistaking the venom behind her words. That's when I snapped. I'd been standing there trying to stay calm, trying to keep my cool while she tore into me. But seeing her holding that photo, shaking it like it was a weapon, was the final straw. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to keep my voice steady, and said, "Put the photo down and get out of my house." She froze for a second, staring at me like she couldn't believe I just said that. But I wasn't done. I told her, plain and simple, that if she didn't leave right that second, I was going to call the cops. And I meant it. I wasn't going to let her destroy my house or drag me back into the chaos I'd spent years trying to escape. For a moment, I thought she might actually listen. She stood there, clutching the photo, her face flickering between anger and disbelief. But instead of leaving, she launched into a whole new rant, this time about Eddie. She called him ungrateful and selfish, said he had no idea how hard she worked to give him the life he had. Then she started ranting about how he'd been blaming her for everything ever since his own divorce. She said he was holding grudges, acting like she was the problem, and how his therapist had brainwashed him into thinking she was the root of all his issues. And then she dropped a bombshell. She said Eddie had been struggling with severe anxiety and depression ever since his wife left him. He'd been having panic attacks, bad ones. There was even a point where he was hospitalized after one particularly bad episode. She told me he'd been seeing a therapist, and it was the therapist who had encouraged him to reach out to me as part of his healing process. Hearing that hit me like a freight train. I had no idea Eddie was going through all of this. Sure, I knew his divorce must have been hard, but I didn't realize how much it had broken him. I had no clue he was carrying all that pain, all that weight on his own. Cecilia kept talking, her words sharp and relentless. But I'd stopped listening. My mind was spinning, trying to process what she just told me. All I could think about was Eddie, my son, struggling in ways I couldn't have imagined. I thought about him having panic attacks and feeling lost and overwhelmed. I thought about all the years I'd tried to reach out, texts, emails, voicemails, only to be met with silence. I thought about the distance, the hurtful things he'd said in court all those years ago, and the wall that had grown between us. But more than anything, I thought about how much I still cared. No matter what had happened between us, no matter how many scars I carried, Eddie was still my son. And even though I didn't know where to start or how this was going to play out, one thing was clear. I couldn't turn my back on him now. He is my son. No matter how much pain he's caused me, I can't just ignore that. Eventually, Cecilia stormed out, slamming the door behind her, leaving me sitting there in the middle of my living room, surrounded by the mess she'd made, both literally and emotionally. I sat there for a long time, just trying to make sense of everything. It was clear now why Eddie had reached out. He wasn't just looking for closure or trying to reconnect for the sake of it. He was struggling, really struggling, and he didn't know where else to turn. After a lot of soul-searching, I made my decision. I picked up my phone and wrote Eddie a message. I told him I was sorry for everything he'd been going through and that I'd like to meet up if he still wanted to talk. I said I didn't know if we could fix everything between us, but I was willing to try. Before I could second-guess myself, I hit send. Now I'm just waiting to hear back from him. My emotions are all over the place. Anger, sadness, guilt, hope. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like I have some clarity. Eddie needs me, and no matter what's happened in the past, I'm willing to be there for him. I know this isn't going to be easy. The wounds from our arrangement are still there, and I'm not naive enough to think we can just pick up where we left off. But I also know that if there's even a chance to rebuild our relationship, I have to take it. He's my son, and despite everything, I still love him. Hopefully, everything gets better from here ahead. Update 3. Hello guys. So many of you asked for an update, so here it is. Eddie and I finally met. It wasn't some grand emotional reunion. It was quiet, awkward, and a little tense. But it happened. He brought his daughter, my granddaughter, with him. She's 4 years old with big brown eyes and a shy smile that reminded me so much of Eddie when he was that age. Seeing her was like a punch to the heart. I hadn't even known her name until that moment. Rory, she clung to Eddie's leg, peeking out at me like I was some stranger. And I guess to her, I was. We met at a park, neutral ground. Eddie looked tired, like he hadn't slept in weeks. His face was thinner, and there was a heaviness in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. He didn't say much at first, just thanked me for meeting him. Rory stayed close to him, playing with a toy she brought along while we sat on a bench and talked. Eddie opened up about everything: his divorce, his struggles as a single dad, his mental health. He told me about the panic attacks, the therapy, and how he felt like he was failing as a father. He admitted that he'd been carrying around guilt for years about how he treated me during the divorce. He said he didn't expect me to forgive him, but he wanted me to know that he was sorry. I listened. I didn't interrupt. When he finished, I took a deep breath and told him the truth. I said that I couldn't just erase the past, that what happened during the divorce still hurt, and that it wasn't something I could forget. But I also told him that I was here now, of course, for him, but mainly for my grandkid. She's innocent in all of this, and she deserves to have a grandfather in her life. I made it clear that my priority right now is her not fixing our relationship, not rehashing old wounds, but making sure she has someone stable in her life. Eddie nodded in understanding, not trying to argue or justify anything, which was unexpected. He simply said he appreciated that I was willing to be there for Rory. His words carried a weight I hadn't heard from him in years, and for a moment, it felt like he was letting his guard down. Then he shared something that caught me off guard. He told me his ex-wife had emptied their joint bank account before she left. Of course, he had some savings on his own, but she had taken almost everything, leaving him to manage on his own with Rory. He admitted that ever since, he'd been struggling to make ends meet, balancing therapy costs, childcare, and everyday expenses. The weight of his words hit me like a brick. It wasn't just about the emotional toll he'd been carrying. He was fighting to keep his and Rory's lives afloat financially, too. I couldn't help but feel angry for him. The thought of someone abandoning him and their child like that with no regard for the consequences was infuriating. At the same time, it made his situation feel even heavier. He wasn't just trying to piece his life back together. He was doing it with one hand tied behind his back. I told him he needed to take action. He couldn't just let her get away with it. Filing a police report and consulting a lawyer were non-negotiable steps he had to take. He seemed hesitant at first, reluctant to make things more complicated than they already were. But I pressed the point, reminding him that this wasn't just about him. It was about Rory. Letting this slide wasn't an option if he wanted to give her the stability she deserved. I even offered to help him find a lawyer if he didn't know where to start. It was a small gesture, but one I hoped would show him he wasn't completely alone in this. It seemed to sink in because he nodded, though I could see the hesitation still lingering in his expression. By the end of our meeting, something had shifted, even if only slightly. The tension that had been hanging between us from the start felt a little lighter. Things weren't magically fixed, but it felt like a first step, small but significant. Rory, who had been keeping her distance at first, began to warm up to me as the afternoon went on. By the time we left, she let me push her on the swings, and the sound of her giggling brought a knot to my throat. I don't know what the future holds for us. Eddie and I have a long road ahead if we're going to rebuild any kind of relationship, and I'm not naive enough to think it'll be easy. The past still hurts, and it always will. But Rory, she's innocent in all of this. She deserves to have someone who will be there for her no matter what. And I want to be that person for her. This might not be the fresh start I imagined, but it's something. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm ready to move forward for Rory, for Eddie, and maybe in some way for myself too. Whatever this journey looks like, I'm ready to face it. Not the a-hole. OP is allowed to be hurt and still choose compassion. People keep acting like forgiveness erases the damage. It doesn't. OP's son absolutely helped break OP in court, and then went no contact while parroting his mother's narrative, and that leaves scars. At the same time, OP didn't chase him for ego or being right. OP stepped back, built a life, and only opened the door again when he came in humbled, in pain, and asking to rebuild. That's not weakness, that's emotional maturity. OP set a boundary. This won't magically fix everything, and OP's granddaughter is now his priority. And OP is walking into this with eyes wide open. That's exactly how a healthy adult handles a traumatizing history. And now let's hear community's opinion. Your ex is textbook high conflict and deeply manipulative. The way she weaponized Eddie during the divorce, then barged into your house screaming about you poisoning his mind, before you even replied to his message, tells me everything I need to know about what the last few decades have been like. She didn't just turn him against you, she tried to own the narrative so completely that even his healing through therapy is now someone brainwashing him. That's classic abuser logic. They'd rather blame everyone and everything than accept that their behavior is finally being called out. The panic attacks, the depression, the emotional mess he's in now, that's the fallout of growing up with her as the dominant voice. It doesn't excuse what he did to you, but it explains why it was so easy to lose him. Your son is responsible for making amends, and he's actually starting to. A lot of people in Eddie's position never get this far. They stay loyal to the parent who fed them the poor me narrative and never revisit the past. He did something incredibly hard, admitted he was wrong, acknowledged the damage, and sat in front of you saying, "I don't expect forgiveness, but I'm sorry." That doesn't magically rewind the clock, but it is the beginning of accountability. The fact that you didn't let him sweep everything under the rug and told him clearly that you can't just erase the past is important. You're not rug sweeping, you're rebuilding from ground zero. Now it's on him to stay consistent. Therapy, legal action against his ex, showing up as a dad and as a son. Words were the first step, but his actions over the next months, years will prove if he's really changed.